Hi, everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX Writers Podcast. My name is Ruben Mendive, and I am your host. Today, we have another brand new writer here for you all, and I'm just going to kick it off like I always do. I ask my guests to introduce themselves. So, your name, how you identify, and sort of what you do.
Okay, my name is Richard Eick, E-I-C-K. It's pronounced like Mike and Ike, like the candy.
Mm-hmm.
I am a writer, an actor, producer, drummer. I'm just an artist in general. And I identify as, I would like to think, a really nice guy. I don't know. Okay. It's a good question, but I think, yeah, overall, I'm just open. And I like to give that vibe off to people so that they can feel comfortable around me, because I do know that I have a little bit of a stone face sometimes where it's like, I don't know if I want to talk to that guy, but you come over to me and I'm more than happy to hear you out. Yeah.
All right. Good for the honesty now. Friendly guy. So my first question is always, so where are you from? Like, where did you grow up?
I am from central New Jersey, and I grew up there. There's a farm town that I went to high school. Well, actually, I went to middle school and high school, and just the tail end of elementary school there. It's called Hillsborough, and it's suburbia, 100%. Just like, was always a farm town. Started coming up more with like cookie cutter houses and that kind of stuff. And I actually lived up in like what I call the boondocks of that town, which was like up in the windy roads where it got all wooded, and like I lived on this piece of land up there in the middle of the woods for a while. But before that, I grew up in a town called Bound Brook, which I jumped around Somerset County a lot and was basically in that area the entire time. But yeah, Hillsborough, New Jersey is my like hometown.
Yeah. And so I always like to ask like what your parents' story is, like how did they end up in Jersey? Also, like what do they do for a living?
It's really interesting because my parents' story is like super wild. My dad is Bulgarian, so he's Eastern European, and he escaped from Bulgaria in 1979, came to the States, and then he went to Brazil, which is where he found his wife at the time, which is my mom. And similar story, she grew up in northern Brazil, a small town called Macapá, near the mouth of the Amazon River, and then she left there to go to Rio de Janeiro when she was young, like 17, 18, was there. That's where my dad and her met, and they came to the States together to start a new life, start a family. And why New Jersey? I think just because the airport, honestly, like you fly in, it's a big port. Like even going back to the beginning of the country, like Ellis Island and everything, it all funnels into New York City and New Jersey. And that's just I guess where they kind of ended up. They started closer to the city there early on, where it was like Jersey City. My dad was working in that area as a he was doing like carpentry and stuff like that, woodworking. That was his skill set. My mom, she was doing like bank teller stuff, and I actually don't really know at that time. I wasn't even around, but eventually they got further away from New York and went further inland and found a nice house in Martinsville, which is Somerset County. And then I came around and I grew up there, but then my parents split up, and that's kind of why I ended up being all over the place in Somerset County, because my mom was here, my dad was there, this and that, bouncing around.
And have you been to Brazil? Have you been to Bulgaria?
I've been to both countries, yeah. I was in Brazil when I was 9 years old, so back in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So I have pretty solid memories of being there, but I'm sure the experience would be way different now, like as an adult, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's party central over there. I'm not saying that I would be doing all that, but yeah, it was definitely interesting being over there. One of my biggest memories actually is I was with my aunt and my brother, and we were just like getting in a taxi from the airport going to where we were going to stay, and we got in like a little bit of a car accident, and just kind of like somebody else had like love tapped us, and like the car moved a lot, and then just like everyone on the curb was just like, yeah, woo, like yelling and like cheering. I'm like, what's happening over here? Like, this is intense. Like, nobody cared. It was just kind of like another thing, you know, just like a peer into a different world. And then I was in Bulgaria when I was a little bit older. I was 15, and yeah, same thing. Just you know, Eastern Europe, completely different. Not third world country, but second. Yeah. So, you know, things are different. You're still seeing like donkeys and stuff like that, like on the road, like people wheeling stuff around, and there's internet cafes. I mean, that was in like 2005, so I guess the internet was still like on the rise. But yeah, it was really interesting, both being young and noticing all the differences and taking it all in, and then coming back to the States and being like, oh, we got it good here.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
That's the thing I tell about people about the US, like the amount of wealth in this country. Yeah. Like, you open your front door and you step into that money. Like, you turn on your faucet and that's money pouring out.
Yes.
Like,
that's a great point. Yeah, I think about that all the time. And I even had I was lucky enough when I was 16, I was studying German, and I went to Germany and like lived with a German family for a few weeks. And, you know, 16, you're not like super young, but you know, you're cognitive. So like that sort of changed a lot of my perspective on just like culture at the time, and coming back to the States after that, I was just like, man, stuff is just, there's opportunity everywhere here. And just lifestyle too, you know, you don't have to be so, I don't know, I feel like the US can be very egotistical and even narcissistic in a way. Yeah. And I fell guilty of that, you know, throughout my childhood. Like, and I think children in general deal with that, but I remember starting to break away from that right around that time.
Yeah, you know, there is this US mentality about, you know, we're so much about the individual, about the self, like, you know, that's all our movies are too. It's like one person who's like trying to figure out the struggle and accomplish their dream, you know? Yeah, so let's talk about, you know, you growing up as a kid in Jersey. I'm just curious how would you describe, you know, the culture of the town when you were growing up and in school?
I would describe it as pretty diverse. Especially where I was, and because I was like always teeter-tottering on lower middle class, and then once I got to Hillsborough, like a lot of people there were upper middle class and even further along. So like I had this broad perspective of like this socio-economical range, and then also like diversity in people's culture or their ethnicity. Yeah. I think that's because same thing, like New Jersey is just like one of those places where people just like pour into. Like there's little pockets of all these communities everywhere. And one of them for me was growing up in Bound Brook. There was like Latinos everywhere. And I do remember feeling like I fit in with them, but I didn't. It was really weird because I don't know. I knew that I was super diverse myself, but I didn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking English, and I wanted to go play soccer with all these kids, and they're all like,
Yeah.
speaking Spanish, and I can't understand what they're saying, and I'm like, man, that sucks. And then my parents were real. It's weird to think about, but I think people who are similar to me in that both of their parents are immigrants, that they want their kids to speak English really well.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't necessarily focus on them learning their language, which is kind of what happened to me, which is unfortunate now because I'm an actor and I can't speak these other languages that I look like I can be speaking.
Yeah.
So I got to work on that.
Yeah.
But growing up there, it was strange. Like, totally just, I liked it. I thought it was a great place to kind of see that range of America.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there was a lot of what everyone deals with, which is like adversity towards your culture, adversity towards your class, all this stuff. Totally dealt with all that on some level, whether it's like, people making fun of you or just, even this more scarier thing that happens is when it's outside of like school or something and you're on the street and you're even with your family, and then like as a whole you can see like I don't even know how to say it, like you can feel when there's ill intent towards like you and your family, and it's out of nowhere and that kind of stuff. But growing up there was good. It was a nice area. I never had like anything crazy scary happen to me. Maybe I would get myself into trouble probably because I was a little bit of an asshole.
Okay.
Just like I like to fight back kind of thing. But great place to grow up. I don't, it's one of those places too where you gotta leave, or you would hope that you would leave at some point, and then you look back and you're like, actually I had a great time there. Like, it was a good place to grow up. Like I said before about like the country just being a great place where we have it good. It's like, there's parks, it's clean.
Yeah.
For the most part, you can go outside and walk around whenever. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And then I think in the social circles is when you start to see some of the truths of what people are thinking and the scarier stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I like where I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, sort of speaking to that point, I always ask sort of people around like teenage years, high school years, like, who were you? Like, how did other people see you? And like, also, who were you pretending to be also? Like,
it's hilarious because I think everybody, it's a difficult question, right? Because you're like, I think on both ends, you're like, what was I trying to be, or how was I perceived? And then you also dig into like, was I really that? Can I admit that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think kind of like what I was saying, like I'm intuitively kind of an empathetic person, and I always had that growing up, and I was able to make friends with a lot of people. Like in my high school, we had a big class. And I feel like I'm one of the few people that was able to make friends with like the majority of the people. Like I can go through my yearbook and sort of like see everyone and be like, oh, I've definitely had a conversation with every single one of these people.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I was nice to all them, but I do remember like growing up kind of being like a little bit of an asshole, like I said, like just because I was into like the New Jersey like hardcore music scene, and like I was a skateboarder, and there's like all these like punk stigmatisms attached to that, and you growing up, you're trying to be hard. Same thing with the whole male thing is very big in Jersey, where it's like, oh, I gotta flex my my muscles here, like oh, bar fight, let's go fight people. And like I had a lot of friends who were into that, and I always remember thinking like, I'm not really into that, but I kind of funneled myself around that just in case, like so that people wouldn't fuck with me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it worked or not. I don't think many people did, and I would stand up for myself when they did, but how it came off, I'm not sure. I definitely feel like I was on both ends where I bullied people and I was bullied. And I think you learn later on that you do the bullying because of some sort of insecurity that you have. What that was at the time, I don't know, but probably the lack of being seen or heard. I think that I was sort of maybe like I don't want to say an emo kid, but like definitely I was an artist and I didn't know what or how to get people to pay attention to what I was doing. You know? And it just seemed like no matter what, they didn't really care or whatever. And like some of my closer friends did, but you know, you at some point you're like, I want everyone to see what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know how that came off. I think that my friends, like I was good friends with a lot of people. So I have good relationships with a lot of those people still. So I hope that people remember me as a nicer guy, but I'm sure, like I said, I'm willing to admit that I've been a little bit of a dick, but that's just what comes with, you know, growing up and learning more about yourself. It's like, well, you know, you can't win them all, but you have to be able to go back and think about like how you affected people at some point. And
it was also high school, so I feel like we were all dicks to each other.
Right. Yeah, totally. And my girlfriend is a teacher now, and she, you know, will tell me about some of the stuff that she sees, and I'm like, oh my god, I was totally that little prick. Like sometimes, not all the time.
But it's also all for show. You're all just trying to show off to each other, but everyone's just as insecure about who they are, what they're doing.
Totally. And then she'll also tell me, though, which is interesting, which is what I think was my saving grace, was I was always a good student. Like that was drilled into me from both of my parents. Like, this is your job. You know, do good. And on top of that, like I was genuinely interested in what I was learning for the most part, like besides math at some point. I stopped liking math. But I think, and what my girlfriend is telling me, she's like, even those kids that are like kind of being, you know, little
jerks.
Little jerks. You can tell which ones of them have a good heart and who really care about their work and who are just doing it because they just don't know how else to express it at the time, or there's something going on with themselves. And that's usually the case, that like she can even go in their file and find out like, oh, there's something happening at home, or, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think, you know, growing up, there's no way for you to know that as a kid, that like all of these people, that some of them you like, some of them you don't like, they're all dealing with something on some level.
Oh no, absolutely. And you know, I want to sort of get into like your household. You know, I think you're, like you mentioned, like your parents, which is what a lot of immigrants do when they come to this country, is like, to succeed in this country, you have to be American, you have to assimilate, you have to be indistinguishable from what like our American ideal is that we see in the media. So I just was curious about like, you know, growing up with two immigrant parents, you know, one's from Bulgaria, one's from Brazil. Like, did you ever feel like your household was separated from your social life? Or did you ever feel like some insecurities about that? Or I'm curious what your experience is.
Yes and no. I think I definitely felt separated from some of the social circles, because like for the most part everyone was like Italian, Irish, Polish, like German, like the typical sort of American like DNA brew. So when a lot of people were like, Bulgaria, like where's that? I'm like, it's in Eastern Europe. Oh, what's around it? The Black Sea, like Romania. Look on a map. I don't know what to tell you. Like, oh, Brazil. That's like by Mexico or something, right? I'm like, it's one of the biggest countries in the world. You should probably know. Like, so yeah, I did feel a little bit of a separation too. Like even when my parents would come around and meet other parents or meet my friends and stuff like that. After a while, I stopped. I wasn't like, oh my god, like I gotta hide it or something. I was just like, I wonder how they're going to react to like my parents, because they both spoke really good English, but it was broken English, you know what I mean? And with accents.
Yeah.
So I was always like, how does that come off? And I would get some, like, you know, my friends would try to make fun of me, but like, kind of like what I was saying earlier, at some point I learned how to just like throw it right back at them.
Yeah.
And like total immigrant jokes and that kind of stuff. But I felt that I don't know, I was always going to friends' places and seeing what their home life was like, and it was, you know, typical American thing. And then like people would come over to my place, and it would be like either my dad's place or my mom's place, and for the most part, you know, we were not doing anything crazy different. But I do remember growing up when I was even younger, the biggest thing that I remember that I was worried about was actually my parents being split up, and that like I would be judged for that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that one household is like this Brazilian thing, and the other is Bulgarian, and like that people just wouldn't even want to understand. They're like, oh my God, like, what's that like? But it was I worried about it a little bit. It didn't really affect me. Like, I think I built a tough skin around and owning who I was like pretty early, because both of my parents, like, same thing. I was lucky where they beat that into me, where it's like, no, you're actually very special. You know, don't think about this as like you're completely different. You are, and that's a good thing. Yeah, you know, like, even to the point where my dad was a little bit probably like too far, like you're genetically superior to these others, you know.
Like, you got the best of both worlds.
You're purebred, like. And I guess to some point, like, that is a little bit of ego building, and that can go both ways, where it's like you either, you know, there's the danger of it, and then there's like if you can just let it sink into you, that you can use it to your advantage. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, totally, I am different, and you guys probably won't understand where I'm coming from, but that's okay. You need my perspective on this. Yeah. It's like reinforcing, you know, who you are, because it's a lot of other things are telling you that you're not like them, so therefore you're like deficient in some way. So it's nice that your parents were like trying to supplement that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think they knew I was like pretty strong-willed too, that like that it wasn't going to affect me, but I was also the more sensitive one, because it's just me and my older brother. And they would always kind of do like the kneel down to the little one and be like, don't forget, you know, the baby. I'm jealous of that. I was a middle child. Oh, okay. So I want to talk about what you did after high school. After high school, I went to film school. I went to film school in New York City, School of Visual Arts. It was a big turning point for me, for sure. Like, even towards the end of high school, like, I did want to go and study science, actually, but I didn't have the math grades to back it up. I couldn't even take physics my senior year, because they were like, no, like you just can't do the math. And I'm like, well, I thoroughly enjoy physics. Like, can't I just learn it in the class? And they're like, nope. I'm like, well, that sucks. Guess I'm going to take another video and film class. And that's basically what I did my senior year of high school. Like, I had 3 periods of doing video and film, and that's where I learned how to edit, and like, you know, I had been filming stuff since I was younger anyway, so like I was just working on that, and then my guidance counselor was like, maybe you consider going to art school. I'm like, all right, yeah, thought about it, was looking at like between Pratt and SVA, and I applied to SVA and I got in, and that was the only school I applied to, and I was like, you know what, this is where I want to go. And I got in early, like I think like October of my senior year. So like I was cruising, you know, all the way. I was like, I'm good. I'm going to art school. No more math, none of this crap. And my SAT scores were like real bad too. So I was like, yes, I got in. And so film school, basically it's a 4-year program. It's a private art school, but it's like, you know, you get your BFA. So I have a BFA in cinematography. But the first year of the 4, you do like a base sort of like a little bit of everything, where you do writing, cinematography, editing, and what was the other one? I forget. I think it was directing or producing. Yeah, sounds about right. Basically the same. But Yeah, I chose cinematography because I had always been like really into cameras and that kind of stuff, and I really thought that's what I was gonna do. Like that I was gonna be a camera guy, that I was gonna be in the local 600 and you know, go through the chain of like, you know, assistant camera, DP, and you know, hope to work in that field. And I was really into it. I dug into that stuff and I learned a lot about the technicalities of it, which now it really helps me because now I'm producing all this stuff, and I can talk camera to a DP or even to anyone else, where it's like, if I have to do it, I'm like, no, we got to do it this way. Or like, even if I'm talking to actors and stuff like that, I can cue them in on something that they might not have known or thought about before. And I'm like, just so you know, you're going to make this person's job way easier if you do this. Stay still. You know, or that kind of thing. So yeah, college was great for me. I did have to take a year off. So I went my freshman year. I lived in New York in a dorm, which was great. Had a great time there. Made some good friends who I'm still, you know, close with. And then I had to take a year off because my dad was like, I can't. He was like switching jobs at the time or something. He was like, I can't like pay for it right now. And I was pissed. I was so pissed. I'm like, my entire life, you tell me that my one job is to focus on my education. This is what I did. And now I got no money and I can't go to college. And I was like heartbroken, but also like furious. And I remember I really didn't even want to talk to my dad at the time. I was like, you duped me. But, you know, we worked things out, and then he was able to start paying for it again. And, I went back. So I finished my degree in 5 years. And then even somewhere around the middle of him paying for it, like I think it was like my sophomore, so like towards the end of my sophomore year, and then junior and senior year, like I had to start supplementing the payments too. So it was rough because I remember even after I graduated, like I got to walk and all that, but I didn't get my degree until like months and months later because I had to go work with my brother and like keep working. And then I like went back to the city and like paid like $8,000 to the office, and then walked over like another spot, got my degree. But I do remember having this feeling of like, I did it. You know, I did it. First one in my family to get a college degree and go through it. And it's something very specific. You know, I'm not just, I don't know. I remember a lot of my friends like going and studying stuff and they just kind of picked it thinking that that's where they wanted to go. And I felt super lucky that like I picked the thing and I knew that it was going to help me in the direction that I wanted to go. That's why I was saying earlier about it being pivotal for me. Like me going to film school at that time pretty much has had a direct effect on my life, like all the way up until now, where I can like trace it all back to like, oh man, if this didn't happen, then you know, I wouldn't have done that, and all this stuff where it's like film school.
And you know, I've said this before on the podcast, but it's like I saw like this like data point or something. It was on Instagram, so I don't know how reliable it is, but they say that the average amount it takes for people to finish college is 5 years. Like that is like we have this myth that it's like a 4-year thing, and the average is 5 years. So and then that's why it's like sometimes people feel like shame about it, or they're like, oh yeah, it took me 5 years, but it's like, yeah, because it's like real life. Real things happen. Things you can't control. And then, but the point is that you eventually did it, and it was like, and you know that you did it. Like it didn't matter if it was like, oh, it took you 5 years. I'm like, yeah, it did take you 5 years, but I did it.
Right.
Like
worked my ass off for that. And not just like in school, outside of school too. You know.
And so like so you got your degree, and then what did you do after that?
Well, towards the end of film school. Well, during film school, I took every acting elective that I could because there wasn't an acting program there. But my senior year, I took the highest acting elective or whatever it was. I think it was like acting 2 or something. And my professor was Talia Lugasi, and she sort of like opened my eyes to what it is that I'm doing now, which is a lot more so acting, but writing as well. And she had always like was reminding me like writing and acting, like They're hand in hand.
Mm.
If you're acting, you should be writing, because you're a storyteller. You have to know.
Yeah.
And I was, stubborn. I'm like, I don't want to write.
Yeah.
And I had been writing for years too. Like I've been writing since I was a kid. But I remember thinking like, I'll just do the acting. Like let the other people do the writing.
Mm.
And it's my senior year. The biggest thing I still remember, like, we did some basic acting stuff. Like you learn a monologue and you do some, freeing exercises and maybe a scene.
Mm-hmm.
But before all of that, it was like classes and classes and classes. And then throughout the year, the biggest thing she was saying is like that you have to have your integrity as an actor, and that you have to be present. And those two things. And it's like, you hear it all the time, but she would beat it into us where it was like, you're really thinking about what that is. It's like, okay, yeah. And one of the examples she'd be like you have your integrity as a person and as an artist. Like if you don't feel like being here right now, walk the fuck out. I don't care. In fact, you're liberating yourself. Go ahead. And then if you're halfway down the hall and you feel like turning back, do it. Like experiment with your moment to moment feeling. And that was so freeing to me. I was like, oh my God, I can just like own my integrity, like in every single moment of my life. And then same thing with the presence. That's in turn essentially what that is, right? It's like that you're here now and that's all you're thinking about. You're so there that everyone else is there with you. So after college, she invited me to go study with her at the theater that she was with her husband. So I did that after college. And I didn't tell anybody. I just like saved up the money and started taking more acting classes with her. And like my brother knew and maybe a couple other people here and there, but like I didn't tell any of my friends really. I was like a little bit scared because I'm like, I don't know how people are going to react. I just went and did my full 5 years here learning to be a cinematographer. And here I am back in square one trying to be an actor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and you say I want to be an actor in Hillsborough, New Jersey, or anywhere in New Jersey. They're like, yeah, good luck. Why don't you go paint some houses? Which is literally what I was doing. So, yeah, it was tough for me because socially, I was like, you know what, like. Almost living this double life kind of thing where it's like, I'm going to go do my thing and I'm going to be fully invested in that because that's what I want to do. But I don't care for any of the scrutiny or any of your crap, your judgments or your thoughts, like your opinions. I don't care. So I'm not even going to bother getting into that conversation. I'm just not even going to tell you. And then like, fast forward, whatever. I graduated 2013. I moved out here 2015. So fast forward like 2.5 years, and I was leaving, and like I'm telling all my friends, like, yeah, I'm going to Los Angeles. They're like, what are you doing there? I'm going to be an actor. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pursue like what I really think I should be doing. Yeah. And some of them were like, actually, that makes sense. You are that guy. And then others were like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, I don't care. This is what I feel like I need to do. And kind of even going back to what I was saying earlier about leaving your hometown and exploring and that kind of stuff. I just felt at that time that I needed to get the hell out of there. And I knew it too in my body and in my mind. Like I was getting frustrated because my environment wasn't nurturing what I wanted to do. Even the people that were like close to me. And like I was still playing shows like with my band and stuff like that. So I did have my drums because I play the drums, and that was always nice. But what I really wanted to do was go and take a swing at being an actor and being a storyteller, and like I was the only one. I felt like trapped, and I was like, I need to get the hell out of here. So I had been out here a few times. My brother lived in California for a little while, and then he moved back, and then I had visited him several times. So like I knew what LA was about, and I liked it. And I also, like I said too, like I was a skateboarder growing up. Like I loved the counterculture, and I was all about, I thought I was going to be out here being a pro skateboarder, like when I was younger. And then, you know, it was like an easy sell for me, because I could have gone to New York, but I grew up going to New York. Like I went to college there. I was like, I know what New York is. And I also wasn't into the theater scene then either. And my acting coach at the time was like, you got to do theater. You got to do theater. And I was like, film and TV, you know, Star Wars. And, so.
Brazilians in space.
Exactly.
I think we still need those.
But yeah, I think it was the move for me at the time. Like I had to do that. I was getting so like pent up and like a lot of tension, even with my girlfriend. And her family and my family, like I like felt it. I was getting like aggravated at people easily, and like I wasn't like that. And I was like, I gotta get the hell out of here. So we made the plan. I was like, I brought her out here, and I was like, I think you're gonna love it. And not just saying that as my own agenda, but I do think like you sort of need this same thing. And she did. She opened up to it as well. Like recently, it was like, if she says it now, where it's like, if I didn't leave at that time, I think I would have like lost my mind. Like what else would I have been doing there? Just been the same person. And we came, and it's been, you know, up and down, but so much has happened and changed, and I've grown so much, and I'm so much further along with what I want to be doing that like I can't see it any other way. So leaving and making that decision like right after college, and thank God or whoever, the universe, to my first acting coach that opened that door for me. You know, I'll email her from time to time. I'm like, thank you. You know, just because and I know we didn't really dig that far into it, but like those little things that you said like resonated. And yeah, it just opened my mind and my artistic heart even more, where I was like, I can just be me even more. And that's really what it really is about. You know, it's like, because you have this like passion, this art you want to do, and you know, sometimes we hold it close to us because it's like it's precious, and we don't want to like share with somebody because then they're gonna tell us it's dumb, and then like but if you have people that nurture it, and then it also speaks to you moving out here, because if you also feel like you have this thing and then you're just sort of just trapped in your surroundings, and like it's frustrating, you know. It's like frustrating, scary, because then you're thinking like, am I ever gonna get it out?
Exactly. And
then I agree though too, where it's like, especially with writing, where you're like, I don't know if I want people to read this one.
and you know, I'm always curious. Somewhere I heard that like the first 2 years in LA are the hardest. If you can survive the first 2 years, then you sort of made it a little bit. Like you're officially gonna stay there, because within the first 2 years, it's very easy for you to have to like go back home. So I'm just curious what those first 2 years were like for you.
I've heard the same thing a lot of times, where like even after my third year, and people would ask me, they're like, how long you been here? I'm like, oh, like 3, now 4 years. And they're like, oh, good, you're here to stay. Yeah. And I'm like, yep, I'm here. And I know they're definitely tough, and a lot of people that I know that I met in those first 2 years are gone. So the biggest thing for me was like, I knew I was getting here with basically a fresh start. I could be a completely different person if I wanted to be, and like no one's gonna know. You know, like I'm ready to go and hit the ground running, and I really was. I did my research. Like I knew what I had to do to an extent. You know, I also think that like part of the game is like you got to just hit the sidewalks and start talking to people and like figuring out how to do it. And I spent a lot of time doing that, but yeah, it was super tough, like financially, still to this day, super tough, you know? And it's always, I ended up, I think it was within my first 2 years. It was like a year and a half in. I had run out of money and options for work at the time. And my brother, luckily, had this paint gig back east, and he was like, yeah, fly out and, work this gig for the summer, and then, you'll have enough dough to come back. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And it was really fucking hard because I had to leave my girlfriend here. She was dealing with stuff at the time where it was like she was still establishing herself as a teacher, so she was getting her teaching credential, and then like on top of that having to work and pay rent. And we also had this crazy roommate at the time. Much love to him if he ever hears this, but
shout out to him.
Yeah
Shout out to all the roommates.
Lovely guy, but you know how roommates are.
Yeah.
So it was really tough. And then I came back and I had some medical problems too, like had like skin problems. Like I had like acne coming back from like my 20s, and I was like 26, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm like coming out here to be an actor, and like here I am, like I can't even control my skin.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like I was depressed honestly at the time, because like I'd made the move, made some progress, and then boom, like here's my skin flaring up, and then on top of that I have no money and I have to leave my girlfriend. I'm like, this is the worst. Super hard, but I knew that I was going to be back. And one of the biggest things, I don't know if you've read this book, but The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Oh, it's a great book. And that's, I don't want to say saved me, but definitely helped me through that time where it was like I was in New Jersey, like literally the lowest point of my life, living in my brother's basement in the darkness, waking up every morning to go work in this job that I hated, and like knowing that my life over here is like slowly getting further away from me. And like I would just write, and one of the things that you do is the morning pages, and you sort of write, and as the morning pages evolve, it turns into not necessarily a prayer or a wish list or like a manifestation type thing, but in a way where it's like, you're writing the things that are on your mind, even if it is like what you want. And I wrote down very specific stuff, and like I was into that kind of stuff too with my brother. Like we're both really into like mindset stuff and having a strong mentality, and being specific is one of those things. You have to know like how or what it is you want, and even if it's like slightly different, like the more narrow you can focus it, like the easier it is to make a roadmap to get there. And I wrote down all these things. I was like, I want to go to this acting school to study Meisner technique. I want to get an agent. I want to book this role. I want to do these things. And like within a year of getting back, all of those things happened. And it was like, all right, I'm back on track.
Yeah.
I had to go through that like lull.
Yeah.
So the first 2 years were super hard. I remember being like, probably the most, and I usually don't say that I get depressed, but like that was probably the closest for me.
Yeah.
Like where it was like, oh my God, this like hurts my head. It hurts my body.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm hurting other people, even though you're not really. Like everything like is just coming at you, and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a similar way. Like I'll look back 2 years later and be like, I was fully just depressed that whole year. Like I was like, okay, good to know.
Right, and I for a while too, I had to like own up to that.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh no, that was a full on depression.
Yeah. But it's that thing where it's like so brought on by like circumstance that you're just like, well, this is like it's like, well, this is life. Like of course, but like. If you just feel like so like low about it, and it's like you have no real joy in your life that whole time, you're just like, I mean, I don't know if it's clinical depression, but it's definitely a depression. Like, yeah. No,
it's a real thing, and like it's tough because like I have friends now who deal with it on completely different levels. Where like for me it was, and I think this is kind of the theme, unfortunately, of my life growing up, where it's always this like back and forth of like financial issues, right?
Yeah.
Like just being like paycheck to paycheck. And like there was a time period in my life where I was good and I had supported myself. I had like a solid system going on. But after I moved and that ended, it was like back to this again. And then, it's scary because I think a lot of depression stems from that, where it's like, I don't even have the chance. You know? But then there's people on the opposite end where it's like, they got it, right? They have all of that.
Yeah.
And now it's coming from like lack of purpose, which is scary. I think that's even scarier.
Yeah, I don't ever want to be in that place, because I think that it's scarier.
Yeah, super scary, because like I think with the adversity thing, it's like that only makes you stronger.
Yeah.
If you can allow yourself to, dig yourself out of the hole and learn the lessons. But like people on the other end, it's harder for them to learn the lessons because there's like little quick exits for them. Where it's like, let's say,
totally.
For an example, like if they're well off, like financially, it's like, and they're feeling like crap, it's like, oh, I'll go get a massage today and eat these expensive foods.
Yeah.
I'll be good. 2 weeks later, they're like, still haven't done anything with their lives. And they're like, ah,
yeah.
And it's like, well, you're not solving the problem by just like taking the quick way out. You got to go in and figure out what's happening with you, why you're not doing what you want to be doing. I don't know. It's scary for sure.
Yeah. And so, I want to talk about like where did the writing come in, like where did it start? Sort of, how has it grown?
The writing came in early. You had sent me those questions beforehand, and I was really thinking about it. I was like, when did I actually start writing? And I think it was right around kindergarten, first grade. I was like super early. But before that, I think it actually had stemmed from me drawing. Like I was drawing pictures and kind of telling little stories with my pictures. And I just didn't have the vocabulary or the language yet. But then, I started writing just in school, as everyone does. And one of my first like successful works was there was this like young authors conference in my area. It was like held at the local community college, and they essentially would pick books from each grade level throughout the county. And I think they had only picked like 10 or something like that, 5 to 10, and like mine was picked. And going back to what you said about Brazilians in space, my book was called like 3 monkeys in space or something like that. But the whole thing, the reason that I got picked was because it was formatted and structured right. It was like there was a beginning, there was a middle, and there was an end, and the characters went through this journey. And I had no idea at the time, because you as you're learning in the school system, it's kind of just like plug and play, where they're like, okay, do your beginning, something like this has to happen, whatever you want, blah blah blah. I chose monkeys, and then the location, I chose space, and then something else has to happen, conflict in the middle, and it has to rise to this thing, and then what happens at the end, and so that carried throughout elementary school, middle school, and I always liked it. I did enjoy writing, and I was always very imaginative. And then somewhere probably around high school, same thing, like writing about things that you would have to read and projects and this and that. Like I always had a very obscure view, but for some reason my teachers liked it. And I think it was just because it was different. And I was telling my girlfriend the story again the other day, because it's kind of one of those things that relates to teachers, is that they can kind of like say one or two things and like have this profound effect on you that they don't realize. I mean, they probably do at some level, and they have that job like where they have to be, reassuring and say things from time to time. But when they genuinely say it, I had a CP, college prep English class, my freshman year of high school. And, I didn't think anything of what I was writing, because it was high school now. I'm all about like the social circles, blah, 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 schoolwork. I'll do it just to get by. And years had gone by, and I was in like my senior year of high school, and I was in a video and film class with this kid, and he goes, "Oh, you're Rich Eick? Oh, Mr. Puma always talks about your writing. Did you have him for AP writing? I'm like, no, I never took AP English. And he's like, oh, well, man, he's always talking about your style of writing and how clear you are and like your perspective and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, really? I had him for CP freshman year.
Yeah.
And he's like, really? Well, yeah, he's always talking about you. And like the guy, like I wasn't like super close with the teacher or anything. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of was like rebooted my like confidence and also my like, oh, maybe I should like actually dig in a little deeper because I'm just, you know, putting it on the page and just scraping by, and apparently it's getting some good reviews, you know? So I'm like, okay, maybe if I put some time and effort into it, like I could turn this into something. And that sort of funneled into my filmmaking and my my acting classes later, where it was like we had to do writing exercises for acting, where it was like, okay, how do we write a scene? Like, we're just going to focus on one scene, 3 pages. One character wants to do this, the other character wants to do this, go. And yeah, it just like evolved and evolved, but it came in early, and it definitely helped that I had just kind of been a creative writer or like freehand or whatever, like throughout my life, where I just developed my voice. And even my girlfriend to this day, she'll like ask me for help just writing simple stuff, where it's like, how can I make this a little better? I'm like, and I'm not the best with like sentence structure or grammar, but I just think that the way that it's like your voice comes out, your actual speaking voice. And I remember, I forget what teacher it was at some point, was like, yeah, write how you hear your voice in your head. Like, and if that's how you speak, put that on the page. And I was like, yeah, I love that. I love that idea. Because I was always, I remember early too, like being like, I'm going to write something now. I'm going to be this proper Englishman. And like, you know, writing all like Shakespearean crap. And it didn't sound like me. And then like once I started owning into that, I'm somewhere in the middle where it's like, I'm not like a street kid, but you know, I hung out with like, you know, whatever, ramp rats, we used to call them, like skateboarding. We would be at the skate park, you know what I mean? Like we weren't ghetto, but like we listened to hip hop, we listened to punk, like we had this like rawness, grittiness, and like that's kind of how I spoke. I was like, okay, I can put that on the page, but I can also have some intellect behind it.
And yeah, I think it's true because, you know, writing is very much about like getting the message across. What is your intent? Is that coming across to the audience? And if you're more worried about structure and like all the like technicalities of it, you're not truly speaking your authentic voice. And that's what communicates through to people, you know?
Right.
And that could go for anything, you know, like that's why it's like, you know, when I write an email, I'm like, who wrote this? Like, the grammar's off. This sounds awkward, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I talk awkward. Like, that's why.
Exactly. I love that too. When like you can read stuff like that and immediately you can hear the writer's voice. You're like, I kind of like this person already, you know, like that they just did it how they would. Yeah.
I do want to talk about, you know, you're in LA, you're acting, you're writing, you're doing like 100 things. So I'm just curious about like where you see your like Latinx identity, you know, this Brazilian identity, and, you know, like how has it manifested here in Los Angeles, and what has been like the reaction to it, you know, just because, you know, I'm sure it comes up a lot in acting. It's like, it's very much about type and what you look like and what you can fit into.
Right.
So I'm just curious, like, what's your own relationship with that identity part of yourselves, and like, how have you seen other people react to it?
Yeah. I have embraced it even more than I think I ever have. And it has helped me a lot. Acting wise and writing wise, where if I'm going to write something, like I take all of that into consideration now, you know, like even writing roles for women, like I think about that a lot more too. And I think the beauty of it is that when I start with the intent of like, okay, I'm going to have this diverse character or a female character, like that stretches me as a writer now, because I've spent a lot of time writing male parts that could just be anyone really, right? And now it's like, okay, how can I effectively write a female part? Like, it's very difficult. And to because now you're diving into like understanding the psychology more.
Yeah.
And same thing with LatinX, where it's like, okay, like if it's going to be this Latina or Latino character, what's their, like, there's so many things that goes into building a character.
Yeah. And
now you're just digging into all of that, and you have to consider it, especially because of the opportunities that are coming up for our community. But acting wise, yeah, I mean, and it ties into my writing as well, but I became a part of this diversity and inclusion group. They do this thing called the New Normal reading series. I think I had mentioned it to you before.
I promo them every so often.
Yeah, definitely. They're doing a great thing where it's Broken Barriers, which is run by Floyd Reeves, and then the Latino Filmmakers Network, which is run by Mylen Calianis. And essentially what they do is, they bring in a writer, and then they cast the parts, and then they do a live stage reading in a room and have this event, and it's all different. They call them teams, where it's like African American team, Latino team, Asian American, Native American, Indian American. Like they're really spreading it out now. And it's great because they're all connected. So they, bring in industry people and kind of see what's happening on the ground level, which is what I love. And like, I've been a part of this New Normal thing since the beginning when they started it. And because of that, I've had so many opportunities. Like, I just kind of stuck around, and like, I went there, not knowing anyone, just kind of like going back to what I was saying earlier too, of like hitting the ground, like seeing what people are doing and connecting with people one by one. And yeah, I became friends with Floyd and Mylen, and Mylen basically took me under her wing and was like, and she knows everyone, or it seems like she knows everyone, where it's like, she's taken me to CAA, UTA. I did a table read for a writer of hers there. I went to go to Hispanicize last year, and there I got to meet a bunch of people because I was, with her, and I got to pitch projects to producers, like all that kind of stuff. I don't know how else it would have happened so quickly if I didn't get involved with the Latino community. So I'm like praising it now, because I'm like, well, yeah, my brown skin is helping out a little bit. I mean, it's good. And like, even my actor friends, they kind of, we're on this level now where like, a lot of them are white, and we all love each other to death, and they're now, it's like funny because they're making fun of me in a good way, where they're like, oh, look at you, Mr. Brown man, getting all the opportunities. I'm like, yeah, that's right. And so yeah, I definitely embrace it, and it's a good thing to get involved, but at the same time, like, I invite all my white friends too. I'm like, you guys need to, like at some point, it's not going to be like, oh, this is like this Latino movie or this African American movie. No, we're all going to be in the same damn movies and shows and books and all this stuff. Like, and that's where I think my writing and my acting, like where I want to take it, is where it's like, I want to embrace my specific community to, ride that wave and bring attention and the right sort of attention to it. But at the same time, it's like, I just want to fully integrate everybody, because it's like, I'm sick and tired of this separation.
And you make a good point, because, there is this like, these like reading series that they do, and it's for like our community, by our community, and we're like highlighting stuff, but also like, it's great for us in this little pocket, but if we really want to get up there and really like spread out and be successful, we can't do it alone. Like I saw, like, I forgot which company, probably like NBC, did like a big inclusion festival, and they invited every brown and black person that they've ever heard of, and they were talking to each other about inclusion and diversity. But I was like, but all the people making the decisions are white. Like, all the people that are like working in the industry, like, why are we talking to each other about it? We should also have them in it here, so they know about it, so they understand, so they hear us, so that together we can make a difference about it. Like,
absolutely. And I do think, because I've got tons of white friends who who totally get it.
Yeah.
I do think though that, like you said, like having them come and understand it from the ground level, and how we can integrate them, because then they can see it a little more clearly. Because I think to them they're a little scared, where it's like, it's not in my, like, it's not my place to tell you or how or whatever for me to get involved. Yeah. But maybe you can cue me in as to how I can help. Yeah. I think that's probably the issue, is that they're tiptoeing around it. Yeah. Where it's like, no, come on in. Like, we're more than happy to have you in and eat some tacos with us.
Yeah. And it also speaks, because these spaces, is like, it's for us, by us. So it's like precious to us and everything. So then when we have like outsiders or white people come in, we're like, but this was for us. And so they can get a little awkward, that interaction of trying to like integrate these like right things. But it's also like, we need allies. We need like allies that will come into these readings, see someone great, and then later be like, oh, I'm going to recommend that person. Like it's great that we recommend each other and we help each other out and we support each other and we shout each other out. But we have, the bigger work is to like have allies also be doing that work with us, Yeah,
I love that you said that, because I totally preach that, where it's like, you have to have allies on every corner in this city, and then within this industry, where you have to have an army of people like that are rooting for you when you're not around. Because guess what? There's meetings happening right now, who knows where. Honestly. And it's like, who are they talking about? And what are they saying about that person? So, like, that's 100% true. It's like, be careful with what you say about people, and how and if you're shunning them from what you're doing and all that kind of stuff, like, just be super open to everyone, because you'd never know who's gonna, open the door for you. Or become an ally down the road. That's happened to me so many times, where it's like, I had no idea that was going to come from this person. And it's like, wow, I'm so glad we were on good terms.
Yeah, and you're right that this town is very much about who you know. So let's make sure that, in supporting and uplifting our own voices, we're making sure that we're having a broader audience to that, and knows that we're doing it, and knows who's involved, and knows the work that's going on, because that only works to our benefit. And it also falls on the allies to sort of listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, like, I always tell people, like, don't tweet, retweet. So if you don't know that much about something, or retweet someone that knows exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely.
So so I do ask people, like, what is like a theme you see in your writing? Are you always trying to tell the same story over and over? Is it like do you like, what do you try to like do with your writing and convey in it? Like, what are some messages, themes? Like, is there a thread that like goes through all of them?
I do think yes and no. Yes, because I was just telling somebody this the other day too, where like I'm weirdly drawn to the theme of betrayal. I don't know why, I just like that theme. It's like gritty, dark, and like I love that kind of stuff where it gets super emotional, and it's like, why? And I think at the root, it's like both sides of the coin. It's the person who betrayed and the person who was betrayed. Like, they're both entitled to their feelings and the reason why. And that's a scary thing to accept for people. Yeah. And I think exploring that is so interesting, because there's so many different forms of it, especially in like our modern society. Because, even you go back to like older works, Shakespeare and stuff, like it's all over betrayal. And it's like so heart-wrenching. I like that stuff where you're just like, oh my God, like that kills. Yeah. But I get it. Yeah. But other than that, I love comedy and I love drama too. So I don't think I ever follow this like one theme throughout. I like exploring all the different ones, and even not even having a theme in mind sometimes, just kind of going and see what comes out of it. I'm like, oh, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah. That's kind of what happened with the thing that I wrote that you were involved with at the One Acts, where like I started writing this piece and like it just ended up being this like heart-wrenching thing, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that was even in me. And then like a day later I wrote this like stupid comedy about like pooping or something like that, you know. Like, I kind of enjoy the entire spectrum of it. I think that's why too, kind of like with what I said, where you can just start kind of writing whatever's like brewing in your head, and that all of a sudden like you discover what it is that you're trying to say, rather than like, and I think I have both too, where I'll come in where it's like, no, I know what I want to say and I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna get there, and then there's also the opposite, which I really enjoy, which is like, I'm just gonna write and see where this goes, and then the themes will just pop out of the page themselves, where you're like, okay, yeah, this is definitely about like, you know, a tragedy or you know, whatever, happy ending, or this, I don't know, so much to explore that I don't think it's necessary to stick to one theme always. But I will say I go against the grain with what my most recent acting coach would tell us, and he's a really, really smart dude. He's like, if you want to write drama, write a lot of drama. Don't really do too much comedy. In fact, probably stay away from it for a while. You know, write drama for 10 years, because guess what? You're going to get really good at it. And I get that from a disciplinary standpoint, because any skill that I've developed has been because I put in a lot of time. And I go against the grain with that for some reason. I go with like, my mind can be so sporadic, where I'm in a goofy mood, or I'm in a serious mood, or I'm in like an existential mood. That's another theme, actually. I do like to write about like the connection or disconnection with God or purpose or that sort of thing. Randomly into that, with exploring that. I think that kind of goes into like me dabbling in psychedelics and that kind of shit, where like, you know, you have this broader and more grand feeling and connection to everything, and it's very much so like you can't explain it. So the closest you can do is write about an experience that might enlighten somebody else who has either had a similar experience or has no idea, or it's a fictional thing, and you're like, and that's interesting to people. Like, I love that kind of too, where it's like you can take a real experience and put it in this fictional setting, and like all of a sudden, you know, you're reaching an audience that, you know, would have maybe not normally read your stuff.
And so I do want to ask, you know, I always like to ask people, like, who are the writers that they admire? You know, these could be like heroes of yours. This could be peers, you know, people in your life, people whose work you're loving right now. Just, you know, because I'm always looking for new people to interview, but also just for the audience at home to like find out about new writers.
There's this dude who I've been following on Instagram. Maybe you follow him too. And I don't know much of his writing work, but I'm really curious because of kind of a friend. I'm not like great friends with her, but she's an actress that we met through both our acting school and through the Latino Filmmakers Network. Her name is Annie Gonzalez. She got cast on Hentified. And, you know, like, because I follow her and I found who the writer is and like his writing team, and it's him and this other chick, and they're both the showrunners. And they're like pretty young, and they're, you know, just, you know, got this deal with Netflix, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I need to follow this story, right? Not only for me as a writer, but as an actor and as a producer. Like, you know, I kind of want to see like what the trajectory is. And so I haven't read anything of his works, but I'm really curious to see how Hentified comes out. Because it's about this, like, you know, growing up in LA and I guess dealing with gentrification, which is everywhere. But no,
I'm definitely interested to because you're right, it was an interesting journey for that, because they were like fundraising to release this web series that and then they did, and then they sort of, I think, made it, and then it never even came out because Netflix picked it up.
Right,
Like,
which is amazing because that just is a perfect story of
Yeah.
like, you know, put it out there.
yeah, truly.
Just put it out there.
Yeah, I talked to so many people about like web series that I'm just like, yeah, I got 20 views, but like that person's rep by like CAA now because they made enough noise about it and other people
Yes.
heard about it that it was enough to like get people's
Yeah,
attention.
it's also just like proof of concept, right? Where
Yeah.
you might not have all the hits or the audience, but if you, for some reason, stumble into a meeting and they're like, what have you done? It's like, I'll show you right here.
Yeah.
And you have it. And even if it's like crappy filming and all that stuff, it's like you've told a story.
Yeah.
And you went out of your way to bring it to a new medium. You took it from the page. You took it from your mind, brought it to the page, brought it to the screen. That's not an easy thing. Like,
Yeah.
It takes effort. And if people see that and believe in your story, like that kind of stuff can happen now, which
Yeah.
is awesome. Besides that team, somebody else who is a contemporary, and she's a little older than I am, and I met her through Mylen. Her name is Gabby Lugo. She is a producer and a writer, but I went in to just read a small part for her at this table read. And one of the things, and you know, with table reads, like part of the reason why they're doing it is like for feedback and like where you can fix issues, or if there are issues and all these things. And her script was just really good, and I felt like kind of like, I'm like, I don't really have anything to tell you, you know, or like I can't think of anything at this moment. I'm like, I was just like complimenting her. I'm like, these characters are very clear, you know, like I get it from all of them, and the story was clear, and I'm like, I thought it was funny. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I think you're good. I'm like, I get it, like, because that was the other thing. It was very much so leaning left than right. And you know, that can be a thing when it comes to distribution.
Yeah.
So, and she's repped by UTA as a writer, so they're kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to do this. I'm like, whatever. Just I didn't know what to tell her. I just felt bad, but she's I should link you up with her because I think you would love to talk to her. 'Cause she's got a lot of experience both as a producer and as a writer. A couple of my writing partners are really, really talented. My buddy Max, he'll probably hear this, but yeah, he's got a super distinguishable voice. And then on top of that, somebody who's just been in, I got two more. John Patrick Shanley. No, he's not Latino, but he's a wonderful playwright. And I think, you know, inspiration can come from anywhere. And sort of, he inspired, I'm pretty sure, tons of playwrights across the world, and including myself. And, you know, white guy, but inspired me.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Now
like,
I'm kind of like funneling his essence through mine. So like, that's great. And then these two musicians that sort of shaped a lot of my perspective and my taste in things. They're Latino guys. They're Omar Rodriguez Lopez. He's a guitarist and a songwriter and a filmmaker and just an artist. And then his bandmate Cedric Bixler Zavala. And Cedric is Mexican descent and Omar is Puerto Rican, but they both grew up in El Paso, like, you know, teeter-tottering on the border over there. And they were in this punk band called At the Drive-In in the 90s and then early 2000s, and then they broke up and started this experimental rock band called the Mars Volta. And basically me listening to the Mars Volta just changed my everything. Like, it was just like, whoa, I didn't know music could be this way. And like, I knew about Led Zeppelin and all this stuff already, but this was like, whoa, especially for me as a drummer. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know you could be this fast and this precise and this, all this stuff. But besides that, Cedric's writing, the lyrics that he writes, very poetic and always thematic. But the way that he writes with the vocabulary that he uses, it's like, what? Like, where are you even pulling these words from? And how he matches them. And then on top of that, how he uses them in a song. And I'm like, this is like he's tapping into something beyond him, I think,
Yeah.
So that has always been a huge inspiration, sort of just I like the word experimental, where it's like you kind of are just whatever the hell happens, and you can try different processes, and you never know what's going to happen from something, like, and also taking inspiration from like I don't have to be inspired to write something from another writer. I could listen to a piece of music or go see a movie or even take a walk in the park.
Yeah, totally.
And like, all of a sudden I've got an idea.
Yeah.
And I love that as artists we have that freedom.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask, as we're wrapping up, like, what are you working on now? And, and also, like, where can people follow you to keep up with everything that's happening?
I am working on a few things. First thing, I have 2 short films that are coming up. Both of them I did not write, but I'm acting in both, and I'm producing one of them. One of them is called Busman, which actually was one of the one acts that we put up at the show. We're going to translate it into more of like less theatrical and more real. It's kind of about life on the street here in LA and how it's just like a different world.
I remember watching that and being like, I thought you were gonna zag, you zagged, and I was like, okay, like, interesting.
And like I was saying, it's like it won't be as theatrical. Because I think, and what I was telling my producing partner, I was like, that's the one thing that we have to be careful with is, sure, the dialogue is funny and that kind of stuff, but there's this realism here that we're, that we have to do justice. So like on top of being homeless but mentally ill, and that kind of stuff. And the scary thing though is that him and I, like, we're one job or a couple months, in the wrong direction away from a life like that.
Oh,
so
for sure.
It's like it can be scary. So that's one project, Busman, and then the other one I'm jumping on as an actor. My buddy John, he wrote this thing called The Locked Room, where I'm going to be playing a sort of like the darker side of his mind. So I am essentially him, but just like sort of something like Fight Club, that short film. Writing wise, I am co-writing another short with a friend of mine, Jess. She and I are working on this. It's a tragedy really, but kind of similar thing where we're diving into like the world of addiction and like opiates and prescription pills and that kind of stuff, which is a big problem for a lot of young people out here. Well, in the U.S. So we're digging into that one. We just finished up script there. Same thing. I'll be acting and helping producing with that. And then other than that, writing, like I have a bunch of random things that I've started that I just don't know which one I'm going to jump into next. I've got like a couple Instagram TV shorts that I want to do because that's a new format that I want to dive into, like actually putting short films on IGTV rather than just like, because a lot of the stuff that I've been doing has been like comedy based and like, because that's what hits on the internet. But I'm not so much worried about that anymore. I'd rather have the body of work. And got a couple ideas for that, and I've never written a feature, so that's something I need to take down, which is daunting.
It is, yeah.
So, but other than that, people can follow me. I am everywhere, so like, all of social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on TikTok now too. But my Instagram tag is Tetragram, which is TETRAGRAMM, and I got that from the Mars Volta. But there's a song called Tetragrammaton, but it's like this crazy song, and I just that's my tag. And then I also have a production company called Channel D Productions. We do stage production, video production, writing, and I've been helping people do like actor reels and stuff like that, mostly because a lot of these actor reel companies out here, their writing is garbage. And like they have the right idea and the right intention of helping these actors get quality stuff, but the quality starts in the writer's room.
Yeah.
So like it's like you're taking these camera people and these like I don't even know and editors, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll write you something.
Yeah.
And then it's like, put down the gun, Martha. No.
Yeah. I've seen some of these that are just like this costs money. Like people really put like a work into this thing, and like and the writing is just like
garbage.
Yeah.
And like I hate to be a hater myself, but you know, like there's something to say about where people are at in their writing and when they are presenting it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you're just a beginner, you know, you might want to keep your circle a little smaller before you're blasting it all over the place, because you're going to put a bad taste in people's mouth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to be wary of that.
Yeah, so our last question is, I always ask everybody this, is I'm going to ask you to help me title the episode.
Okay.
So the prompt is always a blank Latinx writer. So in that blank, you can put more than one word. You can mix all the words around. Just whatever feels authentic to you, your identity, your journey, this conversation, just whatever feels right in the moment of how you want to identify as a writer.
I was thinking about it.
Okay.
When you sent me the prompt, I was like, oh man, this is it's a task right here. So I think I have 3 words that can sort of sum me up. First one being curious. Very curious person. And I think that's what led me to a life in the arts. And that I buy into my imagination. And that's a gift, and I have to use it. And I also enjoy using it. So curious. Second one being psychedelic. And I think not in the sense that most people think, where it's like, you know, acid and mushrooms and blah blah blah. Sure, you know, that's I guess a part of like why the word was even created, but I was looking into the root meaning of the word, and it's psyche, which is mind, and I forget what it's not delic, but it's like delos, I think, which is clear. So it's sort of diving into that opening of the consciousness. So I think that's in the sense of the word there. So psychedelic. And then the last one being punk.
All right.
I'm a punk at heart. I love like fast drums and loud and raunchy guitar riffs and that kind of stuff, and like that has totally shaped who I am. You know, I love that kind of like just it boils down to being open with how you feel and knowing when something resonates with you, and just going full force at it, and like not taking shit, just doing what you want to do. So I'm a little bit of a punk. So I'm a curious psychedelic punk Latinx writer.
All right. That's perfect. You know, that's all you need to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for, you know, sharing your story. I'm sure listeners will appreciate it.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate you doing this. Kind of like what I was telling you before. I think you're onto something here with spreading the word, and like what we're talking about, like, you know, whether or not something resonates with somebody, you never know.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. And, you know, thank you for the opportunity to get my